Good. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to address you. And apologies for my Spanish not being better than it is, but I compensated by having a Spanish PowerPoint that you can read and I cannot. So, but I know what it says more or less, so it will be okay. So what I will say is continuous with the introductory remarks from Raoul Letellier about how the law has to be continuous with social justice, how to bring these two together. And this topic here is specifically concerned with global justice and that ever more dense and ever more influential law that is now taking shape at the global level. So we have, in the last 20 years, and that is part of globalization, witnessed a tremendous shifting upward of law to the global level. Many rules have been constructed there, and it is crucial in this formative period of global law, international administrative law, and so on, to keep in mind the interests of the poor and to evaluate the consequences of all these new rules that have been taking shape at the global level. So what I will introduce to you is one idea about how to take that into account, how to make global rules more poverty-friendly, and that idea is the Health Impact Fund. And we will then, with the help of the other two colleagues, discuss what the presuppositions are for a project like this to succeed. The basic idea in conceiving this project was to find a political reform that is feasible and also fertile, that once achieved would last in its effects. So here are these 6 criteria for what I think would be a good reform at the global level. The first one is that to really protect the poor in an enduring way, we need a structural reform. We need to build the concern for the poor into the global rules. Secondly, the reform should be clearly moral, and in this case, it is clearly moral by symbolically simplifying the idea that all human lives have equal value, that the health and survival of all human beings matters equally, regardless of their income or wealth. A reform to have political chances should be one that does not confront the entire global elite of the rich and mighty collectively. It should be in the interest of at least some important corporations and some rich governments. The reform should be scalable so that you can start small and then expand it later. That is important because a small reform is easier to achieve, and also because you can then eradicate mistakes that you might have made in the reform movement. So as you scale up the reform, you can see what problems there were, and you can try to make corrections before the reform becomes too big. The reform should be fertile also in the sense that it should strengthen those people with an objective interest in reform, particularly poor people who can become allies in future reform projects. And finally, it should also be replicable so that if it works well in one area, maybe it can be applied in other areas as well. So these are the 6 ideas with which I started thinking about what sort of a project deserves our political support. And the project that I came up with is this Health Impact Fund project. The basic idea is to create a new international agency called the Health Impact Fund, which would allow pharmaceutical innovators, companies that create a new medicine, to sell that medicine from the beginning at a very low price that reflects only the cost of producing the medicine. Normally, companies get rewarded through patents, and they sell the medicine at a very high price for the first years that the medicine is on the market. But with the Health Impact Fund, a company could register the medicine, sell it at a very low price, and then be rewarded on the basis of the global health impact of that medicine. So the more life years a medicine saves, and the more it improves the health of people internationally, the more money the innovator makes. So the idea is that a pharmaceutical company with a new medicine can choose to register the medicine with the Health Impact Fund or not. If they don't register, everything remains like now. If they register the product, then they get a share of an annual reward pool that the Health Impact Fund has at its disposal. These reward pools could start at $6 billion every year, and the company registering a product would participate in these $6 billion payouts for a period of 10 years. Each year, the $6 billion would be divided among the registered products in proportion to the health impact that each of these products achieves. So if you have a product and if it accounts for 8% of the health impact of all the registered products in a given year, then you get 8% of the 6 billion in that year. That goes on for 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years, the product goes generic. It becomes open for all companies to produce. Now, $6 billion is a very small amount of money in the world of pharmaceuticals. The world spends about $720 billion on pharmaceuticals every year, and so this would financially not make a big difference to the world. But in terms of health, it would make a huge difference, because the medicines registered with the Health Impact Fund would obviously be the most important medicines, the ones that have the greatest impact on human health. It's crucial for this idea to work that the payments, even the future payments, are secure. A pharmaceutical company will not undertake a research effort unless they know that the money is actually there to reward them. So if you start researching now, it will take maybe 7 years, maybe even 12 years until you have a marketable product, and you will then be rewarded for the 10 years after that. So it's crucial to this idea that governments are willing to pay this money, $6 billion every year, and guarantee that they will do so into the future, 20, 30 years into the future. Now, this money, you might say, it's difficult to obtain given the global financial crisis. Everybody is very stingy these days because of the crisis. But really, the Health Impact Fund does not ask for new money. It's just a different way of funding what we are already funding. Under the existing system, we are funding medicines by giving the inventor a temporary monopoly. These temporary monopolies are in many ways wasteful. One big waste is the deadweight losses that you see on the right. When the price of a medicine is much, much higher than the cost of the medicine, then many trades that are advantageous to both parties, the seller and the buyer, cannot happen because the seller cannot undersell his own monopoly price. And so a lot of social value is lost each year because all the people who are willing and able to pay more than cost but less than the monopoly price are excluded. If you move a medicine from the patent track to the Health Impact Fund track, then you avoid these sorts of deadweight losses, and the entire area above the cost line is now consumer surplus. it's benefit to all of us. And you can see here in this diagram that we can afford to pay the producers, that is the inventors of the new medicine, as much or more than they are getting on the patent system, and still have more left over than we have presently. So the deadweight loss can be divided between the innovators and patients and taxpayers, the general public, and that makes both parties better off and nobody worse off. So on the whole, the Health Impact Fund doesn't cost new money. It's a new expense for governments, but the taxpayers who fund governments are saving more money than the governments are contributing to the Health Impact Fund. Now, the Health Impact Fund is a proposal that is similar to other proposals that want to institute prizes for the discovery of new medicines. But the Health Impact Fund has important advantages over these prizes. The first one is that the Health Impact Fund does not need to decide which disease should get a prize for a remedy. You simply tell innovators, you research anything you like, wherever you think you can make the greatest contribution, and we will then measure the health impact of your medicine and pay you accordingly. Secondly, ordinary prize funds have to define very precisely the conditions that a medicine has to meet in order to win the prize. And that's very hard to do before you do the research on the medicine. The Health Impact Fund avoids that problem. The Health Impact Fund simply says, you make the medicine better or worse, whatever, you deliver the medicine you want, and we will then reward you on the basis of how much good this medicine does in the world. The third problem with prize funds is that it's very difficult to decide how much money should be the prize for the winner, for the company that develops the new medicine. Should we make it $600 million? Should we make it $1 billion, $2 billion? What is the right amount of money to incentivize innovation? The Health Impact Fund doesn't need to answer that question. It puts $6 billion on the table each year, and that money gets divided among the innovators. If the reward that the innovators get, then more innovators will enter and the reward rate will be driven down. If the reward looks poor, then innovators will stay away from the fund and the reward rate will recover. So the rate of reward on the Health Impact Fund is self-adjusting. It adjusts itself to the true cost of pharmaceutical innovation. This self-adjusting feature reassures innovators that they will never find the reward very, very low. That cannot happen. And it assures taxpayers that the reward will not be very high and that pharmaceutical companies will not get a huge windfall.